There's a Dollar Tree within a few miles of almost anywhere you're sitting right now. Over 16,000 of them, coast to coast. And I want to make a claim that's going to sound absurd until I finish making it. That store, not some tactical outfitter charging $40 for a fire starter, is quietly one of the best stocked prep sources in the country. Not because it sells survival gear, because it sells groceries. And some of those groceries are chemically, nutritionally, and historically identical to things people pay 4 times as much for somewhere else. Here's who already knows this, even if they've never called it prepping. Single parents doing math in the checkout line, retirees on a fixed income, working families who buy things that have to work the first time because there's no budget to buy them twice. That instinct, buy it right, buy it once, is the whole discipline. It's not fear, it's just respect for your own margin. Today, 7 canned meats worth stocking, with exact prices, real shelf life data, and something most of these videos skip entirely. Which of these cans still has trade value 30 days into a disruption? Which one matters more at 90? And which one you'd be the last person on your block willing to give up after a year? Then 3 cans that look like they belong on the same shelf, that you should actually walk past. And before we start, one more can. $3.79. A history that runs straight through the Second World War, through a head of state's own memoir, and a detail almost nobody knows. Most people who buy it use exactly 1 can, decide they don't love it cold, and let it sit in the pantry for years, never realizing that can was built from day one to outlast exactly that kind of neglect. We'll come back to it. Subscribe now, because next time we're turning this same 7 can list into 3 actual meals with no stove and no power. Your nearest store is probably open right now. Let's start. Item 1. Chunk Light Tuna. A 5-ounce can of Star-Kissed or Bumblebee runs about $1.25 here. At a standard grocery store, the same can runs anywhere from $1.25 to $2.50, and a wild-caught foil pouch of nearly the same fish can run 3 or 4 times that. Here's the part that surprises people. The preservation chemistry doesn't change based on price. Steam cook, seal, pressure sterilize, that's the process whether you're paying $1 or $4. And the USDA's own food safety guidance confirms low-acid canned proteins like this are safe indefinitely once sealed, with a 2 to 5 year window for peak quality. What most people get wrong about canned tuna is assuming the cheap can is nutritionally inferior. Ounce for ounce, the protein and omega-3 content barely moves between price tiers. You're mostly paying for the label. No cooking required, straight protein. A no-heat tuna salad if you've got a mayo packet. In an emergency, it'll even feed a pet. It's dense enough to carry in a bug-out bag without a weight penalty. And it's one of the few pantry items that functions as its own currency. Everyone recognizes the value of a can of tuna. One tip before we move on. Buy it packed in water, not oil, and don't pour that liquid down the drain. Fish oil burns. Soaked into cotton or cloth, it becomes an emergency fire accelerant, which is not what most people expect from a lunch can. Running total after Item 1, $1.25. Item 2, Vienna sausages. Armour's 4.6-ounce can is 89 cents here. Walmart sells the same can for 98 cents singly, or about 73 cents each if you buy a 12-pack. Notice something. The cheap option and the name brand option are sitting in almost exactly the same price band. This one needs 0 preparation, no draining, no mixing, straight out of the can. The preservation method is the same one that's kept field rations shelf-stable without refrigeration for over a century. Heat sterilize inside a sealed container, and the broth does the rest. What most people get wrong about Vienna sausages is treating them as a joke item. Ounce for ounce, they deliver more usable fat and protein per dollar than almost anything else on a discount shelf. 0 prep, ready to eat. The broth inside will flavor rice or beans if you drain it into the pot instead of the sink. It's dense enough to matter in cold weather or physical labor. And here's the pro tip. Don't throw the empty can away. Punch a few holes near the rim, and it becomes a functional base for a single tea light, a miniature camp stove that outdoor stores sell version of for $8. Running total after Item 2, $2.14. Item 3, canned sardines. A tin runs about $1.25 here, against $2.50 to $4 for a boutique tinned fish brand at a specialty grocer. This is the item that closes a gap the first 2 left open. Tuna and Vienna sausage are calories. Sardines, eaten bones in, are calcium and a full omega-3 profile, because the canning process itself traces back to Napoleon's 1795 prize for a food preservation method. And sardines were among the very first fish canned at commercial scale for exactly the reason we're buying them for today. They don't need a refrigerator. Here's a detail worth hedging honestly. Some tinned fish producers, particularly in Portugal, intentionally date and age their cans the way a wine collector ages a bottle, since the oil and the fish continue a slow lipid exchange over years of storage. That's more artisanal tradition than hard science, but it's a documented, widely repeated practice. Which is why what most people get wrong about sardines is assuming a dented or older can means it's gone bad for this specific food. Age is sometimes treated as a feature, not a flaw. Complete protein, bones and all. Full omega-3s in shelf-stable form. Works straight on crackers, no cooking needed. And the leftover oil, same as the tuna water, makes a slow-burning fire starter when soaked into cardboard or cotton. Running total after item 3, $3.39. Item 4, canned chicken breast. A 5-ounce can of Swanson or the store brand equivalent runs about $1.29 to $1.50 at a discount grocer. A 10-ounce premium Hormel can runs $4.44. And once you do the per ounce math, that premium can isn't actually buying you more chicken, just a nicer label. Both the budget and the premium versions go through the same pressure retort sterilization. What most people get wrong about canned chicken is assuming the higher price means less water and more meat. Several independent brand comparisons found the opposite. This one shreds instantly into soup or stew, works cold in a sandwich, and has a higher protein-to-fat ratio than almost anything else on this list. One tip: check the drained weight printed on the label. Not just the can size, the bigger can isn't always the better deal. Running total after item 4, $4.68. Now, put these 4 cans on the counter side by side, because something happens once you actually do that. Tuna, Vienna sausage, and canned chicken together form what I'd call the no-heat protein line 3 interchangeable, zero-cook proteins that let you rotate meals for days without a stove, propane, or power, for a combined $3.43, and go back to the Vienna sausage broth and the sardine oil specifically together. Those two are a fat fire kit, the oiliest liquids on this counter, both of which soak into cotton or cardboard and outperform most store-bought fire cubes for $2.14 combined. This isn't 4 separate cans on a shelf. It's a no-cook meal rotation and a fire-starting kit, and you built both of them by accident just buying groceries. And while we're pausing the list, worth knowing why this particular store can even promise this kind of consistency. In late 2021, Dollar Tree raised its universal price point from $1 to $1.25. That was the first price change in roughly 35 years, and the company said so plainly in its own SEC filings, citing rising freight and supply chain costs. That's the opposite of what most retailers do under the same pressure. They shrink the product and keep the price the same and hope you don't notice. This store put it in writing instead. It's continued adjusting selectively since, with some items moving to $1.50 or $1.75 by 2024 and 2025, rather than letting quality or availability erode quietly. That's more transparency than you get from most grocery chains. Item 5. Canned corned beef. A 12-ounce can runs $3.29 to $3.99 at a Dollar General or Family Dollar. This one breaks our $1.25 pattern on purpose, because corned beef simply doesn't sell at that price anywhere real, and I'd rather tell you that than pretend otherwise. What you're holding is a direct descendant of a very specific invention. The tin can itself was patented in 1810 by Peter Durand, built to answer Napoleon's 1795 challenge to find a way to preserve food for troops. Corned beef became one of the first foods canned at industrial scale, and by 1943, the Frei Bentos plant in Uruguay alone was shipping over 16 million cans a year to Allied forces. What most people get wrong about canned corned beef is treating it like a novelty St. Patrick's Day food. For most of its history, it was standard military and working-class protein, full stop, not a seasonal one. It builds into hash with nothing but potatoes and a heat source. It's dense enough to matter for bug-out weight budgets. The salt content acts as its own light preservative once it's open. And that tapered can shape isn't cosmetic. It's an 1875 design patent meant to let the meat slide out whole. This format was standard in British and American rations through both world wars and remained an Israeli Defense Forces staple under the name Loof into the 2000s. That's not marketing language. That's a documented, decades-long service record. Running total after Item 5, $8.63. Item 6, canned salmon. A 5 to 6 ounce can runs $2.50 to $3.50 at a discount grocer, against $5 to $8 for fresh or premium canned sockeye elsewhere. Corned beef was calorie-dense and meant to be cooked. This one works both cold and hot, and it closes a nutrient gap none of the first 5 cans touch. Canned salmon retains its bones, and the pressure canning process softens them completely, which is why a $3 can delivers a calcium load that a boneless fresh fillet simply doesn't. What most people get wrong about canned salmon is picking out and discarding those soft bones that's actually the most nutritionally valuable part of the can. It's shelf-stable vitamin D and calcium, unusual for a pantry item. It flakes into rice or pasta as a stretch protein, and this is worth naming directly. During the COVID-era supply shocks of 2020, shelf-stable canned protein saw well-documented purchasing surges, as consumers turned to exactly this kind of can when fresh meat and fish supply chains got unpredictable. That's not a hypothetical. That already happened, recently, to people you know. Running total after Item 6, roughly $11.13. Before the last item, I want to say something plainly. This isn't about fear. It's not about expecting the worst or stockpiling out of panic. It's the same instinct that makes a single parent check the unit price before checking the flavor. Buying things that have to work the first time, because there's no budget to buy them twice. That's not doomsday thinking. That's just respect for your own margin. I believe the future is worth planning for not because it's going to be bad, but because caring about people means making sure they're covered either way. The last can on this list is the one that proves this kind of thinking isn't new. It's just been sitting in a can the whole time. Item 7. Canned pork luncheon meat. This is the can from the opening. $3.79, same price I promised you, at Dollar General or Family Dollar. Introduced by Hormel in 1937 to use up pork shoulder cuts nobody wanted, it became the U.S. military's primary shelf-stable no-refrigeration protein during the Second World War. Over 150 million pounds were purchased and shipped to front lines and to Lend-Lease allies between 1941 and 1945 because it solved the one problem fresh meat couldn't surviving transport with no refrigeration at all. This fed the Soviet army when Nikita Khrushchev himself wrote in his own memoir that without it they couldn't have kept feeding their troops. That's not a prepper claim, that's a head of state. What most people get wrong about this can is exactly what I told you at the start. They open it once, decide they don't love it cold, and let it sit in the pantry for years, never realizing it was engineered from day one to outlast that kind of neglect. It has the highest calorie-to-weight ratio on this list. It needs no refrigeration before or after opening. It's been eaten cold, fried, and cubed into rice across documented post-war shortages in the Pacific, in Korea, in the Philippines. Some collectors and military surplus reports have noted decades-old cans from that era still testing safe. I'll say that carefully, because it's a claim from enthusiast circles, not a lab result. But the core shelf stability standard behind it is real and federally documented. One tip: slice it thin and fry it hard on both sides. The sugar in the cure caramelizes, and it stops tasting like canned meat and starts tasting like a seared ham steak, which is exactly why so many cultures that adopted this out of necessity kept eating it long after the necessity ended. Running total after Item 7, roughly $14.92. 7 cans. A no-cook protein rotation, a fire-starting kit, calcium and vitamin D, and one of the most historically significant food products of the last 100 years, for less than the cost of a fast food combo meal. Now 3 cans that look like they belong on this exact same shelf, that you should walk past. Same store, same price range, completely different value. And instead of a running total, we're tracking a running waste total. The first is potted meat food product, under $1, and it's the lowest nutritional density on this entire list. High fat, high sodium, almost no usable protein relative to its calories, and none of the omega-3s the fish cans on this list are giving you. What most people get wrong about potted meat is assuming shelf-stable automatically means good pantry protein. Those are 2 separate questions, and this can only answer one of them. Running waste total. 89 cents. The second is imitation crab, sold as crab-flavored seafood. It runs $1.25 to $2. And here's the problem. It's not actually shelf-stable the way everything else on this list is. It lives in the refrigerated case, which breaks the entire no refrigeration premise this whole video is built on. It's also frequently mislabeled. Independent DNA testing of surimi products found roughly a quarter of them listed a different fish species than what was actually inside. What most people get wrong about imitation crab is assuming crab on the label means crab is the main ingredient. It's typically 35 to 50% processed white fish paste, water, starch, and sugar, with real crab present only as a flavoring extract. Running waste total, $2.39. The third is deviled ham, or canned meat spread, $1 to $1.25, in a can barely 2.5 to 3 ounces. What most people get wrong about meat spreads is treating that can the same as everything else on this list. At that size, you're paying full can price for a garnish, not a meal. Final running waste total, $3.49. So here's where this actually lands. Tuna, Vienna sausage, sardines, chicken, corned beef, salmon, and pork luncheon meat add up to roughly $14.92 for 7 cans covering cold-ready protein, cookable meals, a fire-starting fat source, calcium, vitamin D, and one of the most historically proven shelf-stable foods of the last century. The 3 you should skip would have added another $3.49 for almost none of that value. That full 7-can pantry costs less than a single fast food combo meal, and about half of what most people spend on one movie theater popcorn and a drink. If you're thinking about this in terms of what holds value over time, here's how I'd stack it. At 30 days into any kind of disruption, the tuna, the Vienna sausage, and the canned chicken have the highest trade value because they're immediately edible with zero preparation and instantly recognizable to anyone. At 90 days, the sardines and the salmon start to matter more, because that's when nutrient gaps omega-3s, calcium, vitamin D outweigh raw calorie count. And at 365 days, the corned beef and the pork luncheon meat become the ones you'd trade away last, because their calorie density and their historically proven, multi-year shelf life make them the 2 cans you actually can't afford to be without by then. And remember, the store all of this came from raised its own prices in writing, on the record, specifically to keep this shelf stocked instead of quietly shrinking it. That's the kind of system worth trusting with $15. Drop your own never buying that again pantry item in the comments. And next time, we're taking these exact 7 cans and building the 3 actual meals you could make from them if the power went out for a week. No stove, no fridge, just what's already sitting in your cart.